Hello all, a nice tale here. I started off yelling a little bit there. Bringing you another knife review of this, the Tactile Knife Co. Archer. This is a very premium knife and a completely USA made knife. I know there are a lot of different thoughts on Tactile Knife Co. I like what they're doing. I think they take feedback and they tighten up models pretty darn well and make improvements. I do suggest maybe not necessarily buying the first run of every knife they do, because they tend to put a knife design out and then get feedback and say, hey, we can improve it like this, or hey, we can make it more consistent like this, and they typically do. But that also means that the first run of these knives tends to be a little bit... not always, but some of them can be inconsistent. Or you're increasing your chance, and... I mean, for a small batch company, yeah, that's kind of what you're going to deal with, especially nowadays. USA made, that's kind of the thing. Let us jump right into the Tactile Knife Co. Archer. As you can see, this has beautifully milled with the feathering texture on the handle in titanium. The blade is, I believe, Magna Cut on this thing with a good heat treat. Doesn't say it anywhere. There's no billboarding. Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. It just makes it hard to recollect all the knives steels when I don't get to see them. This knife also, as you can see, has inlays of crystallized tie on both sides. It's sort of a blue-purple. It's a little more on the blue, but I've noticed that hand oils make them go a little bit more purple. So it's sort of pearlescent. It's quite nice. It's also got a blue backspacer. It's titanium as well. Let us get into specs and talk about this knife. Blade length on the Tactile Knife Co. Archer to the front of the handle, which is where I kind of like to measure, is 3 inches and 3/8. So 3.4, let's call it. You can, if you measure all the way back to here, get to about 3.5 inches. But I don't do that measurement point, so is what it is. The overall length of the Tactile Knife Co. Archer is 8 1/8. Yeah, pretty much on the dot. Maybe a little bit more, but just a hair. The handle length of the Archer is 4 and just under 7/8. So 4.8, maybe? Let us get a weight measurement. .53 ounces. So yeah, you're not getting your ounce and inch, but this is a full titanium frame lock. So that was probably not going to happen to begin with. Let's be honest. Hardware check. Always on the absolute opposite side of wherever I pull this out. Every time. The pivot is T8. The handle screws are T8. The lock bar insert, which you'll never have to interact with, and the pocket clip, which you probably won't ever have to interact with, as this thing is not reversible, is T8. All T8 all around. Yes. I know Tactile likes doing that when they can, and I greatly appreciate it, and I think most people do as well. Especially if you're getting an American knife, you're kind of hoping that they're going to go that extra range, extra distance in just those little things. It's kind of the point of paying more for an American knife. Not all companies adhere to that, but I think Tactile, for me, in my experience, do. I know some people are a little iffy on them because they've had inconsistencies and some QC issues on their knives, but it also, like I said, it often tends to be the first run. It often tends to be something that they're doing a first small batch and they improve upon it. They take feedback, they listen, they conduct themselves well, and I think they did good. They're a good company, I think. Where was I? I was in the territory of trying to find the... Why is that at 5? Hello? Zero that out. Yeah. Okay. The Archer is 444 thousandths, so under half an inch thick on the handle, which is quite thin. The blade stock is, even though it actually looks thicker, I gotta be honest with you, it's only 125 thousandths. Something about this knife, maybe it's because the handle's so thin, the blade stock looks thicker than it is. And behind the edge, you see this tiny little bevel because it is very thin behind the edge. Whoa, okay. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable calling that 10 thousandths behind the edge. This thing is ridiculously thin. It is got a lot of room to drop. It is very thin, and it came sharp. And yeah, it's also got, if you can see it, a hollow grind on it. This is a cutter. This is a freaking laser beam. This is, holy crap, great. This thing performs like a dream. And has action on bearings like a dream. There is no play. There is a tiny bit of pivot lash. Just the tiniest hair. But I honestly can't tell if it's lash or just when you're in this position the blade has a little bit of side to side for some reason. I think it's just side to side. When it's locked out, there's no play whatsoever. There's no detent lash. It's got a very strong detent, in fact. There's no failing this thing. I mean, strong enough detent that it's kind of difficult to reverse flick it. It's quite strong. It is perfectly center. Where is the camera? There it is. There's no play in any way, but like I said, I don't think it's actually pivot lash. I think it's the blade actually has a tiny bit of side to side, which is kind of weird because there's nothing down there and there's nothing when it's open. But it is what it is. I doesn't really affect it in any way, shape, or form, and I haven't noticed it. So it's centered. It's had no problem staying center. Do with that what you will, but I guess it's there. Stop pin on this. See, I just slipped off that because it is a pretty strong detent, and you're kind of on the bar if you're not careful. The stop pin in this knife is, I can't even honestly see it. Oh, there it is. It is, there we go. It's not internal attached to the blade, but it is internal to the blade. So it's nowhere near the plunge grind or anything like that. So you're not going to have any issues there. You know what? Before we start talking about the nitty-gritty, let's do a quick comparison. On the size of this knife to our comparison knives, being Civivi Elementum for small and Civivi Conspirator for large. As you can see, this knife is larger than the Conspirator. It is a full-size knife. It has about the same blade length as the Conspirator. Maybe, in fact, a tiny hair shorter if we're measuring from there. But it's got a good amount of handle. It's got a big arcing handle. I'm guessing that's part of the reason why it's called the Archer. That big arch. That big arch, however, does also make this knife pretty tall. It is probably just as tall, if not slightly taller than in open position than the Conspirator. It is, though, thinner than the Conspirator. Decently so, thinner. Probably pretty darn close to the Elementum. And it is reasonably tall in the closed position. As you can see, the Conspirator sort of doesn't quite cover it up. It's a tall knife. It's not hard to carry in the pocket. It's not taking up too much space, but it is not the slimmest pocket carry ever. Well, it is quite slim, but it's not the shortest. in the height. Plunge grind is way, way freaking back here. You don't touch the stop pin, so it's not a problem, but it's way back here, which is amazing to see. The edge has a lot of room to be cut off, and seeing how small this bevel is, because of how thin it is, you've got probably more life than most knives in there. Yeah, that's great to see. I like seeing that more companies need to focus on that. It's great. Oh, the blade finish is a stone wash. And this is some sort of blasting on this finish. I guess we should just mention that. Clip. The clip is where this knife stumbles a little for me. It's got a solid amount of retention. It is pretty close to deep carry. Not quite, but it is pretty darn close. It's milled. It looks good. The only problem is I think this clip is a little bit too wide. Like, see, I think if they cut down this side of the clip a little bit and made the entire thing thinner, it would be better. Because it does affect the ergos. Like, I feel the clip. And it's not uncomfortable in this position at all. It's quite comfortable in your standard saber grip position. But I do feel it because it stands up so proud, but it's also wide. I will say that the hammer grip on this knife, because of that arch in the handle, not comfortable at all. You feel the clip. Now, if you go back here for the hammer grip, it is farther away from the edge and reasonably comfortable, but you definitely feel the clip. Then again, this is not a knife where you want to really be forcing this thing through material. I guess you could probably go up here, and it's not bad up here. You're kind of half on and half off the flipper tab. It's not bad up here. You could probably get away with that. But this is where you're going to be living with this knife most of the time, and it's comfortable. But I still wouldn't mind seeing that clip trimmed down just a bit. Or maybe even just harder chamfering. Like, really contour the crap out of that thing. I don't know. The clip can be improved. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. Action and deployment methods, as you can see, you've got two, but very heavy detent. Very heavy detent. This is relatively new. I haven't really broken it in. I can reverse flick it, but it is strong. It is a strong detent. And I think the one thing that they really could do to improve that is extend this hole just a little bit further down. Because when I go to reverse flick this thing, look where I land. I want to be right where this very impressively and beautifully machined area is. But I can't really get a good grip there. So I have to move up slightly into the hole. The hole is just a tiny bit higher than I want it to be. It works, but if you extend this down a little bit, move this area down a little bit, and give just a little bit more hole access, basically just that much hole, longer hole, while moving the entire fuller, or yeah, I guess fuller, down a bit, I think that would make this knife much more comfortable to reverse flick, much more natural to reverse flick, because like I said, I already land pretty much right there in the first place. It's not bad, but because of the strong detent, I could see some people having a little bit of issue there. The jimping on the flipper tab could also be improved. I think really the flipper tab just needs to be a slightly different shape if it's going to have this super strong detent. It works good for more of the push grip, the push button. But the light switch sort of can slip off pretty easily because the jimping's not super aggressive and it's pretty rounded at the top. I don't think it's a problem, and clearly I can actuate the knife, but while it feels really good, it just doesn't always work as well as it could. Again, these are small design elements that can be improved, and Maybe they will be. Hopefully. It won't take much to really just make this knife almost perfect for a lot of things. I mean, you've got good tip access, you got a straight back design, you got enough belly, you got great geometry, you got a pretty darn comfortable primary grip. Just these small increase the length of that, trim that down a little bit, maybe adjust the angle or sharpen this jimping up a little bit, and you would have just an absolute ridiculous home run, and this thing's pretty close as it is. I do want to mention the one interesting thing about this knife. Aside from lock bar access being absolutely freaking amazing. Yes, you can do it up here, but you're getting hit by the flipper tab, so it kind of wants you to go down here, and yeah, it works great, and the action is amazingly smooth. It feels kind of like... It feels like a CNC custom knife, honestly. It feels better and has that certain sort of feeling to it that sort of goes above your standard, even high-end production knife. You can feel it moving, but it's super consistent, and it's kind of got that, like, it's got that sound where it's kind of glassy, but I don't know. It feels better than most knives do. This is a very expensive knife. Do not misunderstand me, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it feels a bit more closely linked to something like a CNC custom, which is interesting. I've never really encountered that in most production knives. Another interesting thing is there's a detent ramp that stops it, which if you go down here, of course, you can easily get past that. But there is a detent ramp on this knife, and it's right there. However, this detent ramp does not act like most detent ramps, and in fact, I've only ever seen this on the super premium expensive knives that have detent ramps. There is no double clutch. It does not kick the blade back open. Very important, because that's what you get with a detent ramp. You oftentimes get an early detent, and you get a detent that any slight movement and the blade kicks back open. So you kind of get in this stuck position. This one is a little bit later, and it does not kick the blade back open. In fact, there's only one other knife that I have with a detent ramp that's super expensive that also has this non-double clutch issue. Another thing about this knife is it takes almost nothing to get over that detent ramp. Even if it stops you, it takes the slightest bob to get it to fall. But if you go down here where you have the most lock bar access, you're also past it, and it's not a problem in the first place. I will say that the thumb flick on this knife is difficult because of that detent, but it is doable. In fact, the reverse flick may actually be even slightly more difficult because of where you want to put your fingers, but it is actuatable in every way. It is reasonably fidgety. Not that this is a fidget knife. This is a gentlemanly, expensive-ass carry. And now we're going to get to expensive. The exact price of this knife in the base model without all of this crystal tie is something in the $500 to $550 range. That's expensive. That's Hinderer territory. That's above Hinderer territory for their base models. It's a very expensive knife. That's technically Chris Reeve territory. Now, I'm going to say something that is completely and utterly blasphemous, but I do not have a Chris Reeve. I want one, but I have no experience with a Chris Reeve. I know, that's painful. I wasn't going to say that they're bad. Don't misunderstand me, or that they're overstated. No, they're not. I fully believe that they're worth every penny and that they're a fantastic knife. I want one. I want an Umnumzan and a Sebenza. And honestly, a Menandi. but I don't have any experience with them, so I can't compare them. That said, I do have experience with CNC customs. I do have experience with ultra high-end production knives. And even though this thing isn't offering that much more than, say, the Tactile, also made by this company, Maverick or Rockwall, which is they're smaller knives. There's maybe less machining, not even necessarily less machining. Tactile does fantastic machining, wonderfully, beautifully done machining. There's not that much less to those knives, despite them coming at a considerably lower price point. However, this knife does justify it. This knife feels that it's in a tier above that. It's fit, it's finish, it's just everything is super on point, super consistent, beautifully done. Like I said, this thing does come awfully close to approaching the territory of what some CNC customs feel like. Not Sharp Eye Design, Brian and Doe CNC customs, but others. Pardon me, I had to take a drink there. This knife is wonderful. There are a few tweaks that could be made. It might not be for everyone just due to the way the handle arcs. For me, it's pretty darn great. It performs amazingly, better than 90% of knives out there. And the Crystal Tie added edition does add like $100 to the price point. But the inlay work is done beautifully. Consistently. Everything on this knife is darn near perfect. And excellently done. Design elements could be improved in certain areas just a little bit. But this is a pretty great knife. Now, we're outside the territory where I'm even going to call this recommendable, of course, because this is a $650 knife. Base model is something like $525. And honestly, I don't know if I even like the base model without this extra little bit of embellishment with the inlay work. So I'm not going to say it's recommendable. I'm not going to say it's not recommendable. This is kind of outside that realm of really can I say anything. You're buying this knife not because you're looking for the value, but because you're looking for that little bit of extra that is intangible. It doesn't necessarily make the knife better, but it kind of does. And just quality, and also USA made, which is a nice touch always for those of us in the USA. Especially those of us who wonder if we can even make things nice in the USA anymore. We are so out of practice with it. So, I adore this knife. I adore what this knife represents. I adore what this knife is doing. I would like to see a couple minor improvements. A little cut off there, a little bit better there, a little more there, as we said. And this knife feels really good. It's a good knife to pick up and experience should you get the chance, because yeah, it feels, it's doing its own thing. It feels, with its action, really different. Like, it doesn't feel completely, the blade does not disappear completely. You got this sort of that kind of scratchy ting as it closes. Let's see if we can get it. You see, you got a little bit of noise there, but it is basically frictionless. It is basically free. I mean, it's definitely free falling, but it's doing a lot of interesting things, and it's quite nice, and it's executed extremely, extremely well. And I think it justifies its price point. I mean, this is basically in the same tier as Chris Reeves, which are comparatively expensive. But this is an ultra premium knife. So as I have said many times in the few videos I've done already, know what you're getting into. That's the most important thing. If you like what you're looking at, yeah, this is a good one. But it's not going to be for most people just due to that price point. So that's all I really have to say. Maybe drop a like, maybe a subscribe, see more knives. We'll be seeing more of similar nature to this, and even crazier. I have a few that are a little cuckoo, and a few that are really, really, really cuckoo. We'll get to there. I like this knife. I'm happy with this knife. Let me know your thoughts on this knife, on this tier of knives, on your experience with Tactile. Because the more they're around, the more knives they put out, the better they seem to get. And I really like that about a company. There are some USA companies that are not doing that. This is not one of them. This is a good one. So, if nothing else, enjoy your look at the Tactile Knife Co. Archer. And leave your thoughts. That is all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.